Good evening, everyone. I would like to call to order this regular meeting of the Urbana Park District Board of Commissioners for the month of September. First item of business is remote attendance. But since we have all 5 commissioners in the room tonight, none is needed. So the first substantive point is to either accept or modify the agenda as presented, and I think there is no request for modification tonight. Do we have?
We accept the agenda as presented.
Second.
That's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on the point? And now that we're off of Zoom, let's go back to directional. We'll start at the far right with Roger.
We didn't even.
Aye.
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 And that carries unanimously. Moving on to public comment. Is there anyone here tonight wishing to address the board? Seeing no indication of that, and as I also understand, no new staff introductions as well. So we're on to the Urbana Park District Advisory Committee report. And Laura mentioned she wasn't going to be here. Is there anything to bring up about the UPDAC report?
Nothing from staff.
Nothing for me.
Okay, then we are ready to move on to our consent agenda. And this evening, the items on the consent agenda are approval of minutes of the August 3rd study session, minutes of the August 10th regular board meeting, receipt of the monthly reports from the 3 departments, approval of the monthly paid accounts payable, action to accept the August 2021 philanthropy report and gifts listed with gratitude, and action on resolution 2021-09 to enter into a tenant lease agreement for 2808 South Race Street. So under the rules of our consent agenda, for those watching at home, it is the purview of any single commissioner to remove any or all of these items from the consent agenda for separate discussion and action. Is there any commissioner wishing to remove any of these items from the consent agenda tonight? Seeing no indication of that, is there someone ready to make a motion that we approve the items on the consent agenda and the receipt of the report items in an omnibus fashion?
I move to approve all the action items on the consent agenda and accept all the information items listed on the consent agenda in an omnibus manner.
Second.
That's been moved and seconded, and under the rules of our consent agenda, at this point there is to be no further discussion, so we will move directly to a roll call vote, starting this time at the left with Cedric.
Aye.
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 And that carries unanimously, so all of these items have been approved. And that brings us to our reports section, starting with financial reports.
All right. Well, I was not here last month. So the reports that I prepared for you today are going to bring you up to speed on activity that happened for the Park District through July and August. So I might have a few more words to say. And I also made a chart to share with you, and I'll explain it.
Thank you.
And I enjoyed doing that. So, and I've added it to my repertoire of charts that I'm slowly building to be able to present more visual information to the board. So the first report that I'll be discussing is the revenue and expenditure report. And this report shows the receipts and expenditures for the prior 12-month period, the budget for the current period, and then the preliminary unaudited results for the 4 months that end August 31st. So this will take us through July and August. The first page of this report is all funds except for the capital improvements fund. Revenues for this period were $5,056,000. And we've received $4 million in property taxes. We received our third property tax distribution for levy year 2020 on August 2nd, and we received our fourth distribution on September 3rd. So you'll see that represented in next month's reports. With camps and programming up and running and pools open, we performed as anticipated in comparison to budgeted expectations, which was really a good thing. If you were to compare to 2019, which was our last normal summer, we had earned $701,000 in fees at that point in the year, which equaled 51% of our budget. This year, we're at $577,000 in fees, which is 58% of our budget. So we've adjusted our budgets downward in anticipation of lower enrollment numbers, but you can see we're performing quite well in comparison to the prior years of normal summers. In addition to that, I also did a little bit of analysis just on the outdoor pool itself. The outdoor pool, so of that $577,000 in fees, $136,000 came from camps and $250,000 came from the outdoor pool. Just that fees number, that number right there. The outdoor pool exceeded budgeted expectations for daily admissions and public rentals. Their overall revenue did not exceed budgeted results, but it performed very well in comparison to the budgeted expenditures. So overall, our transfer to the replacement and renewal fund is based on a 12.5% of earned revenues, which includes all of these fees. And right now, the budget for that transfer is $33,000, and at the end of August, it's already reaching $32,920. And that doesn't even include Labor Day weekend yet. So we're gonna meet our transfer budget, and I'm really pleased about that. So,
And which is a good thing, because wasn't that fund spent down?
it was spent all the way down, and there was no transfer last year. So, yeah, like literally, we're starting over at this point. So I'm really glad that we're meeting our budget for that for this year, and we'll be able to finalize that a little later in the year. But at this point, there's no more earned revenues going into the pool after Labor Day, so typically we can finalize it pretty quickly, and then I just lump it into other budgeted transfers that we do a little later in the year. So that was all really good news. On the expenditure side, we have total expenditures at the end of August of $2,974,000. And we have a surplus after 4 months, which means that there's an excess of revenues over expenditures paid of $2,082,000. If you move on to the second page, this is just the capital improvements fund. So right now, revenues in the capital improvements fund are $160,000. And the negative interest number that you see in that year-to-date balance column is from interest accruals for CDs, for interest earned and recognized in FY21, but the cash will be received in FY22, at which point that negative balance clears out. So I just wanted to explain that for those that aren't accountants in the room, but that's a normal thing, and it's still just carrying over. We have a laddered CD program for the bond money that we issued for the larger bonds, and as those continue to mature, those negative amounts will clear out. Expenditures for the capital improvements fund were $597,000, and expenditures exceed revenue at this point in time, which is normal for this fund. And this leaves a net decrease in the fund of $437,000. And sum 3, the third page of that report, is all funds district-wide. It adds the first 2 pages together. And note that the ending fund balance for all funds of the district is $18,891,000. And following that are the individual summary reports for the main working funds of the district, which are the general fund, the recreation fund, the museum fund, and the indoor pool. And I'm happy to answer any questions about those before moving on to the chart that I made really quickly before we go on to the treasurer's report. So I brought this, I made this chart. I passed some copies out. I don't know if you got one. Tim, did you get one?
I think we sent it on that way.
Okay, if you wanna grab one.
Accidentally. I will look at it.
It's also
but I
up
can
on the
see it up
screen.
there unless somebody else needs it.
So it looks a little busy, but I think if I explain it, Derek, can you zoom out just slightly so you can see the key at the bottom? Okay, there we go. So the point of this chart, I just wanted to give a little bit more highlight to our property tax revenues that make up about 70% of the district's revenues. So we've been talking a lot about fees and earned revenues during this time of COVID. But really what's gotten us through the pandemic has been our property taxes, and we can thank our taxpayers for that. So I just wanted to give a little bit more highlight to how our property taxes work and when those payments come in. They're very heavily loaded towards the front end of the year. So property taxes are due to the county on the 1st of June and the 1st of September if you pay in 2 installments, which most people do because a lot of people have escrow and those are automatically paid on the due dates. So the majority of our payments are received around June and then again in September, October, whenever they come in. And then the county has a certain amount of time before they're required to turn those over to us. So the bar graphs on the bottom of the page show the actual property tax payments that we received. So green is FY22, yellow is FY21, orange is FY20, and blue is FY19. I also did a projection for the remainder of FY22. That's why you can see that we received our full property tax allotment by the end of the year. And I did that by basing it on the average that we would have received by that point in time of year based on these other years. So, but then allocated it out to our total extension. So you can see then the line graph is an accumulation, the cumulative amount that we've received each month. So it adds together the amount that we received in May to the amount that we received in June until it gets up to our levy, basically, the total tax levy. And so it's interesting because you can see, just like we already know, our tax levy increases every year. So you can see that the blue line is slightly below, the orange line is slightly below the yellow line, slightly below the green line. So each year that our property taxes increase by the change in the CPI typically, and there's also a slight increase for any new property that comes online, we get slightly more property taxes. So that was really just the goal of this chart, is to kind of give you an idea of the timing of those payments, and then also it gives you an idea of our total extension as well, year to year over those 4 years. And it's really interesting too how sporadic these payments look now, because if you'd analyze this same data from 4 years ago, we always received the payments in the same months. But when the county had their changeover in some of their leadership, it got very sporadic, and we didn't get payments in May for 2 of the years, which was really detrimental to some of the school districts. One of the years, I don't even think we got a payment in June. It didn't come till July. So it's kind of interesting that it looks a little different now than it would have if we'd had this chart a couple years ago. So that was all. I don't know if you have any insights on it. I'll try to come up with some other creative visuals for you as time goes on. And then, so with that, I think I'll move on to thanks, Tim, the July Treasurers Report. So I've included both the July and the August Treasurers Report, and then I thought I could go through them each briefly, and then you can vote. I think the motion is to vote to approve both of them at the same time, so.
Good sense.
The July Treasurers Report is the report of the amount of cash that the district had on one day, July 31st, 2021. All 24 funds are listed with where the cash is invested for a grand total on July 31st of $17,653,200.30. On the top of page 2 of this report, it lists amounts that we have in interest-bearing accounts for whatever piddly pennies we can get. So of the $17,653,000 on hand, we have $15,890,000 out in investments. The rest is available in our operating account for our ongoing liquidity needs for paying payroll and vendors. The second section, the next section in the middle of the page lists interfund loans, and there were no changes to interfund loans this period. And the final section on the page 3 of the Treasurer's Report, the vendor payments on this report match the paid accounts payable list that was on last month's consent agenda. So this is July's report, so those were already given to you and approved. And the total disbursements for July were $929,000, which is not unusual at all for a busy summer month, but also there were 3 biweekly payrolls in July. So we had a considerable, 1/3 more payroll expense than usual. And with that, we'll move on to the August Treasurer's Report as well, and I'll kind of go through the same information. So for August, we had a grand total of $16,777,296.11 on the last day of August. On page 2 of that amount, We had 15,913,000 invested in interest-bearing accounts. There were no changes to interfund loans. And finally, on the third page, we had disbursements of funds for August of $1,101,000. And if you analyze the distribution across the funds, the capital improvements fund incurred the most significant amount of those disbursements.
Yeah.
And most of that was due to the Blair Oslad project. We paid a couple of sizable bills for that project in August. And I'll go through the capital improvements in detail once we're finished with the treasurer's report. So with that, I present the July and August treasurer's reports to you for approval.
I move to accept the July and August treasurer's report.
Second?
That's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on the point? Hearing none, let's do a roll call starting at the right.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye,
Aye.
and that carries unanimously.
Okay, great. Then finally, I'll walk you through the areas that have had activity since July of 2021. So this will be any activity that's highlighted with an asterisk as things that occurred in July or August. On the Series 2019A budget, costs were paid towards the Crystal Lake Rehab Project, the Crystal Lake One-Way Road System, and the Health and Wellness Facility Traffic Study. In the 2021 capital budget, revenues were received for tributes. Expenditures were incurred for inspection and treatment of an oak tree at Carl Park that occurred out of the hazard tree line, on planning for Prairie Play, on architectural design services for the roof repairs that are getting set to occur at the Phillips Rec Center, on the purchase of a wide area mower that the board approved for purchase in February of 2021 that was finally delivered. And that was the only activity in 2021. So moving on to 2020. Expenditures were paid for tributes, construction crew projects. A second wide area mower was from February 2021 was also approved and delivered. And Blair Park improvements are on this one, and that's the big giant bills that we paid in August. And we also had some water quality improvements at Crystal Lake. And then out of the contingency line, we paid for some concrete testing at Blair Park, and on a small portion of the Crystal Lake CO2 system project got paid out of that line as well, that spilled over from the money that was no longer remaining in the replacement and renewal fund. On the 2019 capital budget, expenditures occurred out of the technology line for work on the planning and operations projection system and on the digital display boards at the recreation facilities. Expenditures also occurred on the saline project and a small amount on Crystal Lake improvements there. And finally, not finally, I'm sorry. There's still two more. The 2018 budget, the expenditures occurred in the on Urbana Park District's share of capital expenses at UIAC for energy efficiency improvements that were part of UIAC's, the building's larger roof project that was actually overseen by the school district. But we worked with them to add additional insulation to the roofing project, and we agreed to pay 50% of that cost as part of our agreement because it would benefit both districts to have that additional insulation. So we're happy about that. And then in addition to that, expenditures were also incurred on the Blair Park project from the contingency line at the bottom of the page. And lastly, just one line item on the 2017 budget for Crystal Lake work that occurred on the Crystal Lake Rehab project. And now Andy and Derek might have some updates for you on capital projects.
Okay, I'll start with our ITEP Broadway project. As you know, we received our letter of award in the middle of August, and we're currently working to finalize grant documents and forms, and including a kickoff meeting this Thursday with our IDOT regional representative, as well as the Federal Highway Association's funding coordinator. We've established a preliminary bid schedule that we'll still discuss at that meeting, and that's having a bid letting in November of 2022. Since this is an ITEP project, all of the bidding, construction documents, contract, change orders is all processed through IDOT. IDOT is the administrator of the contract for construction, and we will align with their bidding windows. With bid opening next November, we should have plenty of time to complete any follow-up paperwork, forms, and contract documents to be ready for construction beginning in spring of 2023. And ITEP has a completion window of 4 years, so we're in pretty good shape to be able to get all that work done within that time frame. Shortly after our kickoff meeting this week, we'll start our quality-based selection process. We'll publicly advertise the opportunity for our engineering services, and then conduct interviews and have a selection and a recommendation to the board. And that would kind of begin our design work beginning this winter. Crystal Lake, just wanted to update on the sanitary district's bridge project. We met with ERA and the sanitary district earlier this week. They're going to be placing an entirely new prefabricated bridge, approximately 20 feet north of the current sanitary bridge location. And that's in order for them to update their sanitary lines through there. So at the meeting we reviewed.
You say 20 feet north?
Yeah, I think they had a
That
better
thing runs
alignment.
largely south to north, doesn't it? I mean, it's a little bit of an angle, but so is it going
Towards the
further
fairgrounds.
west?
Yeah.
Towards the fairgrounds.
Pardon?
Towards the fairgrounds.
Yeah, so further west. I mean, north and west.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
The lake is kind of funny. Yeah.
So we reviewed bridge designs primarily at that meeting. We're looking to do a decorative weathered steel bridge, the Corten steel with a concrete walk. The old bridge and concrete footings would then be removed as part of that project, but then they would be able to utilize their stonework that we just had recently done that the sanitary district had paid for to help kind of dress up the new bridge foundations as well, so we kind of keep that same look on the lake edge. As far as scheduling, it could be potentially in construction this summer, so 2022 summer. So that could be taking place right around or shortly after our road project. But my understanding is that a lot of the schedules depended on funding as well, so it's something that could be pushed further back, but at this point we've been told to start planning for this coming summer. Quick update on the UPDAC Learning Pavilion, the museum grant-funded project. Just to let you know that we're holding our first meeting tomorrow morning, actually, with Ratio Architects on the design services that the board had awarded in July after we had our finalized museum grant agreement with IDNR. And then just on schedule, we're anticipating on doing that design work through the fall and the winter, have our bid out this winter, and then hopefully be in construction this coming spring of 2022. And I do have pictures of Blair again, of course.
That's good, because it's hard to see driving around.
Yeah.
I've been circling the block, and it's a disruptive to traffic to go slow.
So here, yeah, I find myself doing that a lot too. If I'm driving by, I'm going like 5-10 miles an hour.
Yeah.
This is on that north side of the park, so this is one of the focused areas for the contractor in the last couple weeks. So on the left, this is all looking towards the west. You can see they have their compacted subgrade here, and then kind of following, I think I just stepped up a little bit closer, but you can see then they're moving their concrete pours along that side of the park as well. And then another big area of activities, the central zone. So on the left is the kind of connection path that could take you to the right, which would be the horseshoe pits. And then as it moves forward, we're going to the challenge course in between the two tennis court areas. And then here on the right, you can see that challenge course zone. Keith has staked out the challenge course equipment foundations, and this was in preparation for the contractor then to put in their drainage lines, which then they have done since this picture was taken. So we're getting really close to this area being closed out with the contractor so that Keith will be able to come in and do his installation work. They need to frame up one more ramp and then the curbing, and then we'll do like a preliminary punch out of this area as well, and then Keith will be ready to start his installation here. So in this picture, in the background is the playground area where this is actually punched out with the contractor, and Keith is already setting up his ramps and he's beginning his installation of the playground this week. So he has his stakes, and then you can see maybe a little bit some of the drain lines that they have put in. And then in the foreground here, there's a kind of path that curves around to the half-court basketball. And then this area here is the colored and stamped concrete that would then have some bench seating along this area, some Cajun drums that you can sit on and play. And then there's block seating here. It's kind of like an area for people to congregate and just sit around in a little different style. And then that colored and stamped concrete was actually done last Saturday. So we're pretty happy with how that turned out in the color. It's actually called a charcoal color, but when you're out there, it kind of looks like a blue, dark blue gray, which will go well with the color choices that we have as well with the playground and challenge course. So that's all the pictures I had. I'm happy to answer any other questions, of course.
Might add that with Blair Park, we're also working with Smith Burgett's office. We're looking at some improvements to the tennis plaza, the area that's just to the east of the north tennis courts. We have a prospective donor that's interested in funding that project. We're also redesigning a rehab of the pavilion and restroom area, so the two have a similar architectural sort of aesthetic. We met today with the architect that's working on that project and have some nice drawings we're working on. We're excited to meet with the donor in the future. And then Katie mentioned in the capital report the oak trees at Carl Park. I think I've mentioned to you all previously that one of those two oaks, the English oaks, has died. And so they'd been showing signs of distress for the last 6 years. We've had several arborists go out and look at them with us. Mike Brunk from the city of Urbana, arborsmith. More recently, another group that's referred to as called King Tree Service. Mike Brunk provided a nice quote that we used in our press release about that tree. In general, oaks are really challenged right now. We're seeing a lot of oak decline throughout the Urbana area, a number of different diseases, but he feels like English oaks in particular are challenged. And so the last consultant we had out gave us some recommendations to help to preserve the life of the remaining English oak. It is the bigger of the two. It's the one that's the state record and the second largest in the U.S. And so we've done some vertical mulching with mulch and also some biochar that will help with nutrients. We've also treated it for chestnut line borer, and we've also preemptively treated it for oak wilt. It did not test positive for oak wilt, but that arborist is telling us that, and this is new to us, that oak wilt tests are not 100%, and that he's seen several oaks throughout his career where he was confident it had oak wilt, but the test came back negative, and his recommendation has been to treat it as if it is oak wilt, and so we're preemptively treating it. So we're hopeful that that remaining oak will be with us for some time, but we did a press release. I was actually expecting more folks to pick up on it. There wasn't a whole lot of attention, but at this point we are going to move forward with removing the one oak that has died this fall. So it's always sad to see those big oaks go, and they receive a lot of special attention. In the last 6 years we've done a lot. We've treated it with a growth stimulator. We've been mulching it. We water it during periods of drought. One of the things that Mike Brunk shared is that he thinks that the English oak is more stressed in our climate because we have the extreme cold winters and extreme hot summers, and they're used to a more temperate climate where they're native. So unfortunate news. I wish I could say that that the rest of our oaks are doing great. We're watching them all closely, and we keep taking more and more samples to the clinic. And so far, we haven't had any more oak wilt, but we are seeing a lot of bacterial leaf scorch on our oaks.
Is there any usable wood that we could use for projects in that? Since
It's a good
oak is such
question,
a
yeah. You know, the group that I would think of right away is the university. They have an architectural group that's reusing urban wood. And we had a big pin oak from Carl Park that went there about 2 years ago. Otherwise, we occasionally reach out to a guy in Monticello who has a saw, and he's milled some wood for us. So that would be a nice use of that tree, especially
Yeah.
given its significance.
When I sent Derek, I've been collecting things off the internet, which is a frightening kind of thing to say, but it's true. My folder's called Nature Play, and one of the things I was looking at it again today. The log looks like it's about, I don't know, 12 feet long, and they've essentially carved kind of wide hand rests and seats into the log, a little more slope than somebody like me can get out of for the seat. But so there might be even a way that we could use it, which
Yeah.
would be kind of fun to have it stay in the park.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We collected a lot of logs in preparation for the nature playscape out
Yeah, yeah.
probably more than, frankly, it was much more than we needed. But we've emptied that supply, so it might be time to pick a few choice ones.
Yeah.
There's also an oak that's at the nature playscape that has died, and it's also a good size one. And Savannah is interested in reusing a portion of that oak on site. What we call the whale. It's a big log that has sort of an opening on it. That's begun to rot, and it's no longer has the same play value it had when we put it in. So
Yeah.
we'll see if we can pick a choice trunk branching element that could complement nature play.
Yeah. Good.
Any other questions or comments? All right, then, we are ready to move on to the Executive Director's Report. Tim?
Sure. Just to pick up on the oak tree concerns, also I've noticed at Blair Park, there's a pin oak that is probably aged out. You know, obviously it's a very large tree, and two of the oak trees at Leal, the bicentennial and the one next to it, probably 5 years ago, we noticed a kind of a rot starting at the base. Staff has done, as Derek mentioned, other remedial treatments, and we kept keeping a close eye on it. But I've noticed over the last couple of seasons, a little bit of dieback on the upper branches. So hopefully it'll be around for many, many years, but you just worry when you see that. Again, the age of the trees, those are over a couple hundred years old, so it wouldn't be a surprise, but you just count on them and assume they'll always be there. And so that
Yeah, and they're such
unsettling
gorgeous
loss, right. So again, kudos to the staff that are super vigilant, working every day and working all the resources to get information and try to stay on top of it, and also communicate it back to us and the community as well. So I appreciate that. But moving on to my report, obviously a lot of good things in the You Belong Here report. Hopefully you had a chance to look at that. Get my glasses on. I think we mentioned the billboard that was seen. Obviously, it's probably a good message for many groups. Did want to update and let you all know we had our first staff workshop on September 9th with our DEI consultant, August Ball. That was the Phase 1 assessment, the inclusion survey, and there were 8 key areas that we looked at in that study. It was basically a questionnaire that all the staff were encouraged to fill out, and it kind of gives you a real-time analysis of where you are in that time period on those various questions in 8 categories, including contributions to broader purpose, opportunities and resources, belonging, voice, decision making, and equity, where we all scored in the thriving area. And there were 2 areas that were areas of opportunity and fairness and diversity. So obviously we'll be working with staff teams, analyze that information, get a plan of action. We have a couple more workshops, and then it's always recommended to benchmark yourself down the road with, take another survey of more staff. As you develop and learn more things, attitudes can shift. I think the idea of, oh, we want 100% score, it's probably not scoreable in that way. It's kind of where you are as a collective team and an, individual. But the idea is that, more awareness, opportunities for people to expand their thinking, learn new things can influence, our staff group over time. So it's important work, and I think we learned a lot of things, and we'll continue with that. Moving on to report things, health and wellness. Sorry, my glasses are steaming a little and it's hard to see. I'm a part-time glasses wearer, so I'm not used to it. For health and wellness, staff and the steering team is working on all of our personal contacts. We still need to do some follow-through. Our staff team met today, and making sure that we have documents on every gift is critical. So I appreciate staff that's helping us work through that. We have new prospects. There were a number of names that we haven't forgotten about, but everyone was so busy on their main groups. But we really want to try to reach out and get to that group, starting on businesses and new contacts. Example of it, we had a great discussion, Corky, Derek, and I, with the Porter Athletics group. They're the makers of the large-scale athletic equipment, the standards, safety equipment, things you'd see in gyms and, health centers and all of that. Had a very good discussion. Obviously, they try to work with all the groups, and certainly there may be some benefits, that we could work out. I'm sure everyone in the world approaches them and asks for help. We certainly did. They are a business and they have wonderful products to sell, but they do have creative ways where they can do added value or value added to some of their work. So we continue to work with them and look forward to some opportunities. I should mention we were equally disappointed by our connection with Ameren. We spent an inordinate amount of time. We had 4 different contacts in 4 areas that we had to follow through. We were recommended by the fund development person to ask for a $15,000, which is a typical $5,000 award, and went through all of that. And I think Kara ultimately made the application, spent the time to do that, and we didn't receive anything. So that just goes to show some leads aren't productive. They're still worth pursuing, but not every time. We'll continue with that. Wanted to report the efforts on the Yankee Ridge neighborhood campaign. There's some return letters with some checks, so that's been productive effort. Want to thank a couple of the residents that live in the neighborhood for helping us with that. Some new information communicated back with Reverend Willie Comer. As you know, there was an article in the paper. I think I spoke with Nancy about it a month ago or so. Doing the midnight basketball, they've had primarily success in Champaign. I think Corky and I reached out, 4 years ago to talk about it.
Oh.
And, the idea was when we get a proper facility, our current site wouldn't work, for a program like that. But when I reached out to let Reverend Comer know that we're inching toward, our facility, and he was just so overjoyed. He said he'd been praying for 4 years for an answer for Urbana, and we're the answer. So I'm really excited about that. Again, that gives us inroads when we talk about, subgroups and who would be interested in that kind of a program, bringing volunteers and mentors together. So it's a really great opportunity. And again, we couldn't really do it at the Brookings site due to the kind of building and the facility needs that you need to operate a program. Also wanted to mention I participated in a webinar that Illinois ASLA and Illinois APA offered called Health Equity Planning. Lots of staff go to a lot of webinars, so this isn't any special, but what caught my eye was, they're really starting to track research on the benefits of health, exercising, having open space, trails, networks, facilities. So that really speaks to park districts, I think, and us in particular, because really all the components they talked about, health and wellness facilities, extensive trail networks, facilities for athletics in the parks, kids play, nature play, go down the checklist, and we have many of those things in place. So obviously I think the idea was you've got to have certain things in place to get better health outcomes, but we're in the health business, not necessarily the medical end, but certainly in the wellness. And so we have a lot to offer and learned a lot. And as you would imagine from a planning perspective, they kind of pointed out how as people look for places to build, develop, and, create homes, those are the kind of communities with those sort of resources they're interested in, because it has a direct benefit on their own personal and family health. So again, I think we're moving in the right direction on that. Staff's working more on some new community outreach opportunities for the neighborhood around the health and wellness. I think we have an idea of maybe a fall and a spring opportunity, just to make sure that, people know about the facility coming, engage on what items or activities we might want to be thinking about. Again, we've done some of that work. We've put together a whole program for the building of the facility, but there's always fine tuning and, more groups and outreach opportunities. Derek and I had a good visit with the Clark Lindsay team. As you know, if you're at Jazz Walk, you could probably see the construction, or if you've been to Meadowbrook, they're expanding their campus, focusing on 5 phases. This phase will include expansion at the villas, their circular or perimeter road, their maintenance operation building that would sort of come up on the edge of the north edge of Meadowbrook Park. Obviously, our interest and concerns, were just the layout, how things look, screening. We've noticed, a little more excessive noise with more buildings with separate HVAC units, creating sound that weren't there before. And so we, have heard from our visitors and users at Meadowbrook, so we wanted to translate that. We also talked about new opportunities for maybe, earth forming, landscape, and public art. So I did run into Deb Riddens at the Jazz Walk, so we had a follow-up talk, and she was glad we came over, and they're seeking our input. They know that we do things well at Meadowbrook, and they certainly value that site, and so we have a very good working relationship. But again, it will be different. They're densifying their site. They only have so much land. They've looked for opportunities to expand, primarily next door into Meadowbrook Park, as you recall, about a year or 2 ago. That wasn't possible, so they're making the best use of their site, and we enjoy working with them. So we'll continue to track that project. Moving on, thanks to recreation staff, Janet and all the other staff groups that help with Jazz Walk, the setup, the running of it, the pre-event, and the post-event cleanup. I think we had a terrific turnout. I think Janet mentioned there was an estimated 2,000 people. Felt that everyone had a great time, felt very safe. We did a little debriefing. As far as the UPF event, I think we had good turnout. I think somebody mentioned at the meeting Monday there was about 35 attendees, so that was well attended. Everyone had a good discussion and a visit time. We were really pleased to have Binky Donnelly there, who is leading our Art Bomb project, which is the art element in the sculptural element in the glass windows in the building. So she got a chance to talk. And then I took over the table during the event. A lot of people engaged, wanted to know what it was, and a couple of people were interested in getting pledge cards or following up on the art piece. Also for arts and culture, just want to thank Janet and Matt at Phillips Rec Center for hosting a reception for the artists for Bridging the Art Divide. We had that on August 29th, a Sunday at the Lake House. 6 of the artists were able to attend, and we got a great chance to visit with them and stroll down and look at the art, get photos, and every single artist was thrilled to be a part. They thought it was a terrific idea. I think they were just enamored with the idea of taking ordinary things like bridges and using them as backdrops. So we kind of shared with them picture future upgraded bridges throughout the park and over the lake that could also perhaps be included. We had so many submissions, so I think that's a winning proposal, and certainly is fun and brings meaning to the park. For the Kickapoo Rail Trail, I think we're getting the attorneys together on the IGA, so it was timely that we spoke about that. We did get some action on that, so hopefully we'll get that moving. We have a tour Friday. We're visiting the Danville side to look at their KRT connections and get our team more familiar with what their plans, so that we are able to at least speak at a certain level about what we know the connections would be and where, and what the intent at least is. As I mentioned, I think at another previous, at the study session, Lori Pearson will be the new executive director at the Forest Preserve. They had her send off at the city today. We attended it, and for us, it was more of a welcome. Can't wait to start working with you, not a goodbye. So we'll be kind of working in more intense ways on that. And also the Friends Group meeting is scheduled for the end of the month, and so we hope we'll get good turnout and keep that moving at the same time. Also reached out to contacted the Landscape Architecture Department, see if there would be interest in taking on our Saline Blueway, the 4 northern parks along the Saline, and making connections. And we have an opportunity for the spring group in 2022 to take a look at that, just to give us some ideas. Obviously, they're looking at natural resources, water storage, drainage, gray water, those kind of resources, but certainly we're very eager to start working with us on that, so that should be fun and interesting. Planning team had a very good discussion with the AECOM group. They're a worldwide planning and landscape architectural group, but they have many other divisions within their large operation. They have 47,000 employees. They have a major office in Chicago. And when I first saw the number of employees, I kept thinking, until I made the connection, they have a whole financial real estate group that you may be familiar with. Katie's shaking her head yes. And that makes up obviously a large portion, but they have a very strong planning engineer, multidisciplinary, so we enjoyed talking with them, with Derek, Andy, Karen, myself. We're always looking for opportunities to connect with new providers, finding out the work they do. We gave them some ideas of some of the work, but we saw really nice examples of, parks, master planning, athletic type parks, trails, transportation, green development. So we're very, very pleased. We had a chance to work with Michelle Inouye, a former colleague of mine from school. She did a spring studio in 2020 using the Westwoods. So that got Kara and I connected, and they agreed to follow up and do a share. And so we started talking with them. So it's always good to stay in connection of who's doing what work. And then lastly, the IAPD just announced the award winners for the gala that's coming up, the annual event. And the UPD won in the arts category for the Bridging the Art Divide. So we're very pleased with that award. Obviously, we're not sure of the details of that event yet and how we'll handle that, but it's always good to be in the winners category, and it's a very unique program. So I'm not surprised that we were selected. I can answer any other questions if you might have on other things.
No further questions? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Moving on to the President's report, in terms of upcoming meetings, UPDAC is meeting on the 28th of September. Then we have a study session on October 5th, and the proposed topic for that is mission and vision, reviewing, I assume, the planning documents related to that. And then on October 12th, we have a semi-annual review of status of strategic initiatives and review of the annual audit, which is always of interest to everybody. And we also need to take action then to accept the comprehensive annual financial report, which is an important action. And lastly, a review of tax levy options, something which we then will need to pass the following month. So, and I guess there's also mention of a CUSR facility tour for UPDAC on the 26th of August here. That's about it for upcoming meetings.
Can I just ask a question?
Sure.
I just was, so are we a meeting with is UPDAC meeting with the Jetty Roads Neighborhood Committee?
I think LaShonda Cunningham will be joining us with maybe some of her committee members to kind of give us a history and background and tell us more about that program, their group, and what we've done collaboratively.
And that's not something we have regularly had on the schedule before? Have we?
Not
I mean,
really.
I'm
When
glad to see
LaShonda
that.
left the board, I approached her and asked if she would love to come and be a presenter for UPDAC to share her, link her, connections with UPDAC and the board and Jetty Roads Group, and she eagerly said yes, she'd love to do that.
Right.
And so I offered, hey, we have staff involved, we could help, and I think she was hoping to rely on some of their committee members, so we may have some folks visiting. We'll wait and see. I think Kelsey's reached out, but it should be a very good program and probably learn a lot of history and background.
Great, thanks.
Any other questions or comments? Yeah. And moving on to liaison reports, the finance study group last met on the 10th of September, so just a few days ago. And among the things we discussed were health and wellness. Much of that has come out further this evening. Prairie play planning, and which is on the agenda for this evening. just to repeat, we discussed in a little more detail, but if you may have noticed, we have an ITEP grant. It will be a year from November before that actually goes out for bids. I mean, we just got to remind ourselves that it's a wonderful grant because it only has a 20% local match. And part of the downside is it's a much longer and more detailed process to get through. So it'll be terrific in the long run, but we got to march through all the steps involved with that.
Michael, just a note, I think if you remember, our 20% match was waived, so
Oh, yes.
it is 100% funding, but
Yep.
everything else in the timing and the process and the time is correct.
So, and also there was a mention in the written report from Tim about a bequest from Dick and Winona Brown, and he did not mention a dollar figure. There was a preliminary number discussed at the finance study group. This is a very significant gift, probably more than $600,000, with the target being a sculpture in Meadowbrook Park for the most part, but leaving us the ability to use either principal or use it as an endowment fund. And just in the immediate discussion in the finance study group, Roger and I both were pretty supportive of the notion of using it as an endowment fund, but certainly want other commissioners to be thinking in those terms. Just in round numbers, it could easily support pretty much the level of expenditures that we've had dealing with the sculpture things in Meadowbrook over the last several years on an ongoing basis, which is a very significant plus. And we will be getting further details as those are actually known. But I just wanted to raise that. It's a fabulous thing coming forward. And there was a lot of development work involved in that over many years. So both Winona and Dick Brown were former OPDEC members. So it's another important thing to keep in mind. That's about all I have. Oh, we're next meeting on the 6th of October, the finance study group. So unless there are any other questions, move on to the policy study group.
We last met in March, and we are scheduled to meet in October 5th, although I might have a conflict, so we might have to reschedule that. I'm still working on the details, but yeah, we're working.
Oh, no problem.
That's all.
And moving on to the Urbana Parks Foundation representative, Roger.
Well, we met yesterday. We struggled with the challenge of a hybrid meeting of Zoom and in-person meetings. It did not go particularly well. There were some upset folks on the Zoom side, but I think we got it. We just passed the telephone around, and it worked okay. Anyway, we talked about Jazz Walk. The estimate for the pre-Jazz Walk was 55 to 60 people at that event. There is a second former UPD staff member now on the foundation. In addition to Ellen Kirsenoff, Judy Miller was at her first meeting yesterday. So it was good to see her, and good to have that kind of know-how on the foundation. We talked a bit about the tennis court situation. There has been some progress in fundraising. They're about a third of the way toward the goal of $160,000. If you know of anybody that is interested in tennis, let Jeremy know about that. And there was one other thing. Oh, and then Tim, and I really appreciated this, Tim. Tim kind of laid the groundwork with the foundation for the fact that we're going to be needing to fundraise for Prairie Play, and about what he would hope from the fundraising of the foundation, without putting any pressure on them. And you did that rather deftly, I thought. But it puts them on notice. I think that and it's tough because coming off one major fundraising effort and going into another, but both are very, very worthwhile. So that's it.
Any questions for Roger? Okay, moving on to Up Deck Planning Study Group.
Haven't done anything. We don't need to do anything for a while yet, so we're just resting on our laurels.
Okay. Then we can move on to old business, and the first item is action on the personnel policy manual in terms of extending the temporary adjustments that we have made to that.
I have staff is recommending that we extend the use of acute illness leave for COVID related symptoms for another 6-month period. With the rise of the Delta variant, everything is still kind of in the unknown phase, and it's worked really well. We keep an eye on it. We wouldn't want people abusing that, but they don't. So it's been very helpful, especially because there's no more federal leaves available that there were in 2020 to allow people to have any leave for illness or to take care of someone else that's ill. And so by allowing our employees to use their acute illness, it's been able to keep them home, not bring illness to work, for example, not feel like they need to come to work sick because they're out of other types of leave that they have access to. So our acute illness typically is only accessible for certain situations, like if you've had an overnight hospital stay or if you're on a qualified FMLA leave. But the exemption that the board is allowing, the temporary exemption that the board is allowing for use of acute illness, has been very helpful with the pandemic. So we appreciate it, and staff would recommend we extend it 6 more months and then evaluate again at that time.
One, at least tangentially related, what kind of vaccination status do we have, and what kind of, are we actually contemplating mandating we're under the 100 size corporation for which the federal mandate would be there, but are we going to have a vaccination mandate in the district?
We're working towards
If
that.
they count part-timers, we have 400 plus employees. So I
They
mean,
were there. I was contacted today by the chamber as one of those
Yeah.
businesses, so I'm assuming we are, and staff is working on it,
yeah.
working with Matt at this time.
I mean, I would think that, I would hope that staff would understand if we're extending this, that we also need the staff to commit to doing a part in making this a safe place for their compatriots.
We
I
agree.
second that, Michael. I was going to ask, with the same question, because in theory, right, if everything works as possible, we shouldn't need this as much, right, going forward if people are vaccinated. I recognize there may be some medical conditions that prevent some folks but I agree with Michael. We need to be working towards vaccination mandates.
Yep. We're getting our ducks in a row and our forms in order, so we're hoping to get with leadership soon and get that finalized.
Well, I move to extend the temporary adjustment to the personnel policy manual regarding the eligible use of acute illness leave through March 8th, 2022.
Second?
That's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion or any questions on that point? Hearing none, let's go ahead and do a roll call vote, starting at the left here with Cedric.
Aye.
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 And that carries unanimously with all 5 commissioners voting. Next item is old business removed from the consent agenda, and there was none. So we're on to new business, action to award Prairie Play Master Plan Consulting Services.
Carol's here to join us.
So, as you are all aware, for many years we've been preparing for this moment in time, and that is that Prairie Play has been around since 1995, but we need to begin what really is an opportunity of building something new and great for the next generation. And for many years we've been doing background research, so going to state conference sessions, going on visits, talking to UPDAC, and so on. But this is a big step now, actually entering into consulting services for master planning the site. And that's going to be a lot of different things, such as different touch points with the community, what staff is doing, and just getting the word out. And it's truly amazing the number of people I have on the list who want their concrete paver back when we move forward with the process.
Really?
It's more than 100 pavers accounted for.
Wow.
Because some people have multiple and they told me I have 2 or I have 3. So there's interest there in, saying goodbye to the old. And a lot of people are intimidated or, just worried about what will the new be because Prairie Play has been there for so long. But, in my memo, I used the word creating a new playground that's even more enchanting. And I think that there is some sort of magic about the site and about Prairie Play that's going to be really important to capture as we move forward. And like I mentioned, it is an opportunity, as much as it will be sad to see it go. There's been so many steps forward in accessibility, and not just physical, but also working with, kids who have autism spectrum disorder, or there's caretakers and adults trying to interact with the kids who also have accessibility needs. And so in addition to that, and just updates and research on play value and getting kids' heart rate up and socialization, all those things, really, I'm telling you that the next thing is going to be great, and it's something to be excited about. So Upland Design talked to us over the summer, both the board and UPDAC, and just gave some background on what they know about playgrounds and about the process of creating these destination playgrounds. And staff is really excited to begin working with them. So everything from site analysis and mapping, preliminary idea boards, so for staff and board and public to react to and just begin, what are your values? And not necessarily dive right into what it will look like. And there'll also be different kinds of public engagement meetings, presentations to the Board of Commissioners, UPDAC, and then it just slowly gets more and more detailed so that we have a master plan that's, has had a lot of input by all and something that we can be confident in, and it's not just like I was in my office creating something that I think is the best, right? It has community values behind it. And so staff is suggesting to award Prairie Play Master Plan Consulting Services for $14,664 and contingency in the amount of $5,336 to Upland Design of Plainfield, Illinois.
Well, I just wanted to make the comment that if you look at the price tag we're imagining for this project, to get that design work done for $15,000, it will be extraordinary. I mean, given the amount of work that is in this proposal, I do think if we get the quality of product out of it at that price, that is will be fantastic. I am a little curious maintaining a $5,000 contingency in a case where they have already said they're not going to charge for the ancillary printing and that sort of thing. In addition, that they were going to cover that out of their quote. Is there thought to be a reason for a need for a contingency that large? I mean, that's almost a 1/3 contingency.
You know, looking back to our last playground that had a lot of community involvement, where there was a lot of sense of loss, Carl Park. Yeah, we went into that thinking that we had a pretty straightforward plan, and we changed that plan several times through the course as new people came forward. And so we just want to have the flexibility to work with Michelle on additional meetings, additional input if necessary. We think we've got a really good plan laid out here, but we want to be prepared for sort of that unknown factor. And she has provided a cost for additional meetings if we need them.
That was probably the primary area. As you know, I mean, our staff is pretty comfortable working in Urbana. Often there's more questions, might take more time. So rather than, you know, argue over meeting costs, we thought, let's build it in. So if we need to do, you know, more debriefs or reach out or need our, you know, design team there, we would have that. It is hard to anticipate how many meetings. Derek said it very well. When we went into Carl, we had it scaled, we had it priced, we had, you know, ideas, and then wanted people to really gravitate. And really that just began a long process of redesign and replanning. And so, you know, we anticipate some of that, probably likely. Hopefully we have, you know, a really good steering committee, and we've built some, you know, credibility with the many, many playgrounds we've done that are top notch. But it's a new process. And also we have other items out there. You know, there are parking lot designs, building architecturally, you know, with the shelter, if we have to start touching all that. So primarily it's more on the site plan and the actual play element. But if we need to or expand ideas, there may be additional cost or revising or, you know, follow-up proposals, or if we needed to, you know, do analysis of anything. But this gets us moving, gets us going, and gives us a little more rope, you know, to, you know, add extras, or if we needed something special, or a little study model was needed to help convey an idea. You know, things like that that we could easily just say, yes, it's in the budget. Obviously, if things turn differently, we would need to come back to the board and rediscuss approach and budget. So I think that's the strategy we're going in with, and hope it holds through the project.
Also, a word about the product. You know, this takes us through the master planning level. So thinking about Blair Park, another project that we do with Upland, you know, the master plan level, we had a conceptual idea of what the park was going to look like. They did do a deep dive on the playground. They've created some options for playgrounds that we received feedback on. This obviously will be much more focused on the playground equipment, anything that's sculptural or structural that we want to build that's custom. But it still won't be the level of design that we need to take out to bid. And so that would be a future agreement with Upland in terms of actual, where's the paving going to go for any access, what is the actual equipment, that sort of thing. So it's consistent. I find them to be a real value in terms of their pricing structure. Looking at Blair, it was very similar. Certainly the actual detailed plans for bidding was more expensive for Blair than the conceptual work, and I think the same will be true here. But I'm comforted by that contingency, knowing that if we find that we need to do a lot more work with her to get it to a point where we have community buy-in, we have that in place.
Or if it maybe helps people to separate the tasks. I think of this as prelim and planning. Obviously, we get into construction, you know, that could have additional services or needs that we don't know of yet today. You know, I continue to remind everybody, and it won't probably do a whole lot of good, but, you know, we do have a lot of other critical projects. Staying within general scope of our scope and our general budget is really important. You know, I'll just say it, it's a project that, you know, once it gets out, it could take on its own life and just continue to morph and get larger with more ask and expectation, going from great to, you know, beyond great. But it's really important for us to try to keep some guardrails up so that we stay within those budget and parameters. You know, I think we visited a lot of sites. We've spent 25 years analyzing new projects and what others have done. So again, I would urge us to try to stay within that zone, because we do have a lot of critical financial commitments. And it gets real easy in the, you know, hype of excitement, sadness, hysteria, fear, to be driven into some other area of financial fiduciary irresponsibility. So I think we're trying to start out, say we can do a fabulous, you know, play concept here that's relative to scale to what we already have, But to go beyond that and start adding additional, then you have to refigure out connections, utilities, parking and access, circulation, drainage, all the things that really start to add up in cost. So I'm not trying to say we're cheaping it out. We have a budget of, well over almost $775,000, to do some work. And if we have to separate other repairs, like parking or paving, there's probably some flexibility, but we're trying to stay to the project and get this done in a timely way as well. So again, having said all that, you never really know what happens until you get into the project, and then everyone's on their tiptoes working.
Well, I move to award the Prairie Play Master Plan Consulting Services for $14,664 and a contingency in the amount of $5,336 to Upland Design Limited of Plainfield, Illinois.
Second.
That's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion or questions on the point? Hearing none, let's do a roll call starting at the right with Roger.
Aye.
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 I,
Aye.
And that carries unanimously with all 5 commissioners voting. We'll move then on to item B, action to approve a selection of timekeeping system.
Katie's up.
So this has been a project that we've been gearing up for a long time. It's something that especially Derek's departments wanted and needed for many, many years, as they've wanted to track more detailed level of task level in their job tracking. And it's not something that we've been able to do, but it's something that he's really wanted. And in addition, we are currently using electronic timekeeping for all of our part-time staff, but we are using paper timesheets for all of our full-time staff. And all of those, the electronic and the paper, all have to be manually entered into BSNA because there's no integration. So before BSNA, which we implemented in 2019, all of our processes were manual anyway in the AS400. There was no integration with anything. But when we took on BSNA, we knew right off the bat that it was going to be able to integrate with commercially available timekeeping systems. And it was something that we knew all along that was kind of a next step. In fact, to the point that we kind of were looking at timekeeping systems at the same time as searching for a financial system, because we knew that they could go hand in hand. But in some of my reference calls for the financial system, they said, we would really recommend you get the footing down of the financial system before depending on the system, you like the accruals for leave balances get held by one or the other, and it's really good to have that all nailed down before you try to implement a timekeeping system. So I'm really glad we did. We spent more time, and in the meantime, the city's also done a selection process for a time and attendance system as well, and selected the same vendor that we did. So that's an advantage as well. And we know that if the city did it, it was very well vetted, because they have a very arduous and strenuous selection process for vendors for technology projects. So we're very pleased to recommend to the board to accept the quote from NovaTime for future timekeeping system of the Park District. They expect implementation the kickoff will start just within the next couple of weeks, and we'll get a project timeline put together. And they said a typical timeline for implementation is 90 days for time and attendance and an additional 30 days for the advanced scheduling, which leaves us plenty of time for project delays. Our goal would be to get the system up and running prior to the summer hiring season. And I think that would give us ample time to do that. The system right now, the way that we've decided amongst staff, is that we'll have 4 time clocks, actual time clocks, 3 of which will be located at the outdoor pool, and 1 of which will be at the indoor pool. The other sites, there's many options and a lot of flexibility for how to clock in and clock out of the system. So you can use a mobile app, you can use any sorts of tablets, you can use a PC. But the nice thing about the pools is they just have a lot more control if you use an actual time clock. And they're excited to use that and have that with as many employees as they have, 150 plus during the summer season. That was something they were really wanting. So that's the equipment piece. The ongoing software maintenance fees are, well, the software and hardware maintenance fees are $22,750 a year, and it's locked in for 5 years, which is also nice. The other vendors that we got quotes from didn't have quite as long of a period locked in, so that's nice because that keeps it predictable for us. All of our technology team was involved, and a lot of supervisors in the selection process, pretty much all of them. So I did kind of want to turn it over to Derek and Corky, or Andy, you were there too, weren't you, for some of it? So
Yep.
Anybody else that previewed it, if you have comments or would like to let the board know about it, I think that would be good.
I know at the Finance Committee meeting, I mentioned that there are a few things that we are still looking at from a planning operations perspective to make sure that we'd be able to enter a location and task codes and collect that data in a way that works with our staff. And I'm pleased to let you know that the app that they have looks like it'll do all that for us. And then we'll still have desktop computers as a backup in case someone doesn't have a smartphone or they lose their phone. We may also consider getting some pads that we could distribute as well. But having looked at the app that they have, it has the full functionality we're looking for. So it'll be very nice from that perspective.
I, for one, just like the fact that this technology is going to allow us to be more efficient. Payroll in the summertime for all staff is a lot of work. It's a lot of work for Katie's staff to enter it, but even before we had the humanity program, it's better with humanity, but this will take it even that next step further to where when information gets inputted, it's going over and there's no one having to do it again and then checking it and going through each timesheet and signing off. It's more going into a system and signing off. It just makes things a lot more efficient. So I'm excited for us to get to it. It's going to probably take a little bit of training, obviously, to get everybody on the same page with it, but I think it'll be great in the end.
Yeah, just a couple other comments from my experience too, and then maybe Andy wants to say anything, but I was excited on their quote. They actually have a seasonal quote. I don't know if you could tell from the quote, it's a little bit hard to read, but they are allowing us to have 200 licenses year round and then bump it up to 300 during our busy season. So that's
nice.
that's basically the number of employees that'll be using the system at a time. So, our typical year-round payrolls, between 150 and 175 to 180, depending on what's going on. But then in summer, our largest payroll has been 291 employees. So that was like really peak season. And so I think that's really great that they're willing to do that kind of provisional pricing structure to save us some money during the rest of the year when we don't have 300 employees. So that was cool. And then, I had another comment. Staff's super excited about some of the abilities that they're going to get on the scheduling side to be able to do shift swaps and, open up shifts. And it's kind of all employee managed. If an employee can't work their shift, they can open it up and ask for subs. And some of that can be done in Humanity, but it's really slick in Novatime. So I think we're pretty excited about that too.
Can even I think it can send out alerts, hey, there's an open shift now,
Yep.
to all the other part-timers in case they're looking for extra hours. So.
Yeah. Oh, I know the other thing I was going to say. We were pretty impressed with the references, but also what they say their support is like. It's 24/7 support. They say training is included forever. So if you have a new supervisor that comes on, they can do training again with Novatime at any time. So it's not like it's just not one and done training. It's not like, oh, your system's up and going, here you go. You can call them anytime. And we realized when we got BSNA how important that was, because BSNA has amazing support as well. And going from the city where we had Carla, the city programmer, on speed dial anytime we had a problem, it's important to have really good support. So I think that really set them up above too, that we know it's going to be high quality support for staff that have a lot of questions. So
And the city confirmed that they're getting that support, right?
Yeah, they've been really happy with it. They're listed as a reference for them, and they recently implemented. They went through their implementation. They signed their contract in June last year, and they went live in June this year. So they had an extensively longer implementation period than we're planning to have. But they also have a lot of weird scenarios. They have lots of unions. They have police and fire schedules that are very unusual. So, and they've had some challenges with getting all of that correct, but they're pretty happy with it. So, yeah. So, and like I said, they wouldn't be listed as a reference if they were going to be a bad one. So, I've talked to Sanford. He emailed with us, and I think he's kind of my next call after we get through this to say, okay, tell us about how your implementation rolled out, and what to expect. So.
I'd point out too, just in talking with Katie, she reminded me of all the efficiencies. While I might not be able to speak to all the technological advances, just the time saving and non-repetitive things. We have creative staff that would rather do other higher level tasks. So the idea that we could free them of these, grinding, recurring tasks and try to move on to some higher level stuff is really exciting. You can often not quantify that, right off the bat, but I think as a result, we can look back and see what kind of efficiencies and savings and new things we were able to achieve, with the staff tied up with that.
Yeah, especially in P&L.
There's a lot of data entry that takes place, and
Yeah.
getting rid of paper timesheets will be a real plus. So.
Yeah, I'm excited about the reduction in paper as well.
So I move to award the contract for the timekeeping system, Nova Time, in the amount of $35,930 and a 10% contingency of $3,593 to Nova Time of Wilmington, North Carolina.
Second.
That's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion or questions on the point? Hearing none, then let's hold a roll call vote, starting at the left with Cedric.
Aye.
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 And that carries unanimously with all 5 commissioners voting. And we are now on to action to award the Phillips Recreation Center roof replacement contract.
Back to Andy, I think.
Yep. So, as I've outlined in the memo and updated the board in the past few months at board meetings on the project updates, as a result of last summer's hailstorm, we began to work with our insurance to submit a claim for the damage to the roof at Phillips. In the spring, we engaged with IGW Architecture, and that was working towards completing bid documents to replace those asphalt shingles, gutters and downspouts, which would then be covered by that claim. We included 2 alternates in the bid that would then need to be paid for above and beyond what the cost of the asphalt shingle replacement would be. And that was for standing seam metal roofing in lieu of the asphalt shingle, and then also for TPO roof membrane replacement on that flat roof section that we have on the roof. And so we had our bid advertised in July. We held our opening on August 3rd. At this point, the final agreement between the insurance claim representative and the low bid contractor has not been finalized, but tonight we're recommending, after conversations with representatives from both parties, to conditionally award to Central Roofing pending that finalized paperwork, which we're anticipating very soon. And we're recommending to approve the base bid, the asphalt shingle, and that was due to a couple reasons, one being available capital resources in our budgets, and then what we believe to be a complicated, probably more complicated than typical metal roof installation due to the Phillips architecture. And to do further due diligence and checking on the potential of maybe even still moving forward with the standing seam metal, we did reach out for some reference checks on metal roof installations that the contractor had completed. And we got very positive feedback on the contractor, but did find that they didn't have a lot of experience with the specific style attachments that we have with our specified standing seam metal option. And then we also kind of doing some Google searching, Google image, Google Earth of the actual buildings that they were doing. I noticed that the architecture of the roof itself, it was pretty straightforward. Nothing like, I didn't see anything like what we would have at Phillips. So the insurance claim then would cover the cost of that base bid, the asphalt shingle replacement, which is the $86,839.48. And then the remaining funds would then be for alternate one, and then the overall project contingency that we're recommending tonight. And so those funds would then come from what we had already budgeted in our 2021 capital budget for the Phillips roof replacement, and then out of our general contingency line. So we did also ask Central Roofing to hold their pricing for an additional 30 days. We typically have 45 days specified in our front-end bid documents, which would then take us to probably about a week from now, from when the bid opening was held. So even though we had some assurances that they were close to just finalizing their paperwork, we did ask for an additional 30 days to honor their pricing, which they were agreeable. As far as scheduling, as long as we get everything ironed out and get the final paperwork completed with insurance, and we'll get our contract documents going as soon as we could. After that period, Central Roofing plans on being able to complete the project this fall. So other than that, we're recommending tonight to conditionally award that roof replacement project base bid and alternate one to Central Roofing Company of Sullivan. And it's a 15% contingency of $15,701.32.
Just out of curiosity, I noticed that the other bid was 3 times as high as this. Were they just not interested, or?
Well, we've heard someone call it before, they're on a fishing expedition.
Ah.
And so, maybe they were the only bidder and we needed to get it done, and maybe an insurance
Crazy.
could work it out. But
Okay.
yeah, we were pretty surprised.
There've been a lot of roofing going on in this house.
Yeah, there has.
For one thing.
Everywhere.
Well, and who are the
Can-
other two companies that didn't
Yeah.
submit
They
it?
didn't submit the bid.
Can you cover again the situation with the insurance claim? So the insurance claim estimate was some $6,000
Right.
less.
Right.
Are they now agreeing that, well, maybe their estimate was a little low and that they're willing to rejigger that? Or are we taking the risk out of the contingency to cover whatever gap there ends up between the actual insurance payout and
So,
the
yeah,
bid value in this contract?
the bid price is the $86,000. What he was negotiating was based upon his estimated price, which was done, 6 months ago or so, which is even lower. So we're conditionally awarding on that base bid price. Our conversations with them is that they're about to probably enter an agreement for the bid price, but if anything, it would only go a little bit lower. It wouldn't go higher off the base bid. So we would award the contract based on the accepted agreement with the insurance.
Yeah, but the insurance would cover the full 86 then. Whatever so what happened was our insurance company told us, you can go out to bid, that's fine, but whenever you select the final contractor, you need to put them in touch with us and we negotiate the price for the work with them, which is like weird. But that's how they do it. And so they had this estimate and they expected the bids to come in around that. But whenever the contractor was ultimately selected, we put them in touch, and they'll still be responsible for covering the damages that they said they would cover, even if the pricing winds up being 86. Does that make sense?
Well, I think so, but I'm just wondering about the
extra
wording of this. So we might actually expect less than $104,675 to be the final payment if the insurance company negotiates a lower rate.
Yes.
So I'm thinking that the motion ought to say up to the amount of
Yeah.
$104,000.
Yeah, I agree.
675.48, and then also have a contingency if as I
Yeah, that sounds
understand
good.
the
Yep.
circumstance.
Okay, well, then I move to conditionally award the Phillips Recreation Center roof replacement pending finalized insurance agreement up to the amount of $104,675.48 and a 15% contingency of $15,732 to Central Roofing of Sullivan, Illinois.
Second.
That's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion or questions on this point? Seeing no indication, we'll do a roll call starting with Roger.
Aye.
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 And that carries unanimously with all 5 commissioners voting. There was no new business removed from the consent agenda, so we are now down to the comments from commissioners portion of our agenda. Are there any comments or questions from commissioners on more general topics?
I just had a short one. So I actually went to Loman Park this past weekend. Shot a round of disc golf with a group of friends. It was really fantastic. After it was like a group of 8 of us or so, and they were just kind of telling me about a lot of the improvements that the park district has done specifically for the disc golf course. They really love it, especially they upgraded to the cement tees, which is definitely helpful. And then they were also telling me a little bit about that there's the points set to shoot the course backwards. And so we were talking about that a little bit, and they were hoping, they said that they like shooting the course backwards. It's just that the only issue is sometimes if there are other people there, they can start to run into each other, especially on the busier weekends. So some quick brainstorming, we were kind of talking about maybe having a set day as a backwards course day during the week. I know there's a placard there to kind of give information about stuff at the course. They were all really into that idea. They're really happy with it. The only thing they want really is another course.
Right.
That's all.
Nothing succeeds like success.
Right? But yeah, it was really fantastic, and I'm looking forward to going out and shooting again. I gotta buy some discs. But
Great.
yeah.
I
it's
like
great.
the idea of, maybe setting a day or two a week that it goes the opposite direction. Again, policing it might be one thing, but. at
Right,
least-
and I think that if it's established, then they can just kind of
Yeah.
point to the board and say oh, well, it's Tuesday, it's backwards day,
Yeah.
or whatever.
Thursday
our
is
course is
pajama
really-
day, and
I think our course is extraordinary in that it's only 9 holes. A lot of them are 18, but it's fairly complex. And I think the gentleman who initially laid it out, Wilbur Wallace, who was the editor for Disc Golf Magazine for years and stays involved with the club, did a great job really taking advantage of various trees that are out there. And it's although it's a short course, both in terms of the number of holes and the distance, it has some complexity, and the things they've done by adding some additional pro tees and the backward shooting adds to that dimension. It's also great because it's a shorter course and just 9 holes, it's a great starter course for someone who's just learning. So families or first-time disc golfers are very comfortable out there.
It's not easy though.
No, yeah.
It's definitely not easy, but it is definitely fun.
Absolutely. Yep.
One of our guys almost got an ace on the third tee, but it banged out of the chains, but it was awesome. I mean, if you see it and you're just you see where the basket is and where they're shooting from, you're it seems impossible,
Right.
but it's really great. I'm just really looking forward to going again.
are we the only one in town?
No,
No.
Champaign has one at
Yeah.
Dodds, but it kind of weaves in and out of ball fields. There's actually one where you're throwing over the road.
Right.
It would make me a little uncomfortable.
Oh, yeah.
I was going to add, I think if you go visit the quality 18-hole courses, even in Illinois, you'll find dedicated facilities, not shared, and that's the
Right.
difference because there's it'd be picture playing golf when there's a playground, a swimming pool, and a
Right.
tennis court on the course.
Well, that's more interesting.
It might be.
Well, to say for this course, the way that it is laid out, it's really perfect because literally while we were shooting, there was a game of cricket going on in that field there in the middle. So,
Right.
and there was a point where, we were waiting for them to finish batting before we threw, but we never felt like we were going to get in their way or they were going to get in our way or anything. So
Right.
Cool.
That's awesome.
Good.
that's all I got.
Any other commissioner comments? Well, hearing none, I believe we have exhausted our agenda, and so I will declare us adjourned.